All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Annette Arthur, licensed clinical social worker from the Office of Behavioral Health, Adult, Child, and Family Services from the Louisiana Department of Health. I serve as the Louisiana State Coordinator for Early Serious Mental Illness First Episode Psychosis Program in the state office. And I'm very pleased to be your host for this conference session for the final session of day 2 of our 2020 Southwest First Episode Psychosis Conference. We have an outstanding presentation for you entitled Early Psychosis Intervention in Louisiana, Being Progressive to Make Progress. I want to thank our wonderful speaker for being here with us today, and many thanks to all of you for joining us. We truly hope you find today's final presentation engaging and helpful in your work. So we have some disclaimers. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. The opinions expressed in the presentation are the views of our speaker and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. Next slide. Okay, let's get started. Next slide. Amazing presenter for this session. She is our champion at the treatment for FEP in the state of Louisiana. Her name is Dr. Ashley Weiss, and she is a child and adolescent psychiatrist and has been on faculty in the Tulane Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences since 2013. Clinically, she is passionate about caring for those with the schizophrenia spectrum disorders and has provided care for patients both in the acute and long-term inpatient psychiatric settings. In August 2015, Dr. Weiss founded the Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic, New Orleans, better known as EPIC-NOLA, the first episode psychosis clinic in Louisiana. She continues to serve as the medical director and attending psychiatrist. EPIC-NOLA is focused on providing comprehensive care for adolescents and young adults experiencing their first episode of psychosis. In parallel to the EPIC-NOLA clinic, she also launched CALM, which stands for Clear Answers to Louisiana Mental Health, in spring of 2016. CALM is a psychosis early detection campaign aimed at increasing community awareness of psychosis, debunking myths surrounding psychosis, and fundraising to enhance activities for those in treatment for first episode psychosis. Dr. Weiss also serves as a contracted state consultant in first episode psychosis services, supporting consulting with other FEP clinicians, providing early psychosis services throughout the state. In addition, Dr. Weiss provides psychiatric services in the Orleans Parish Correctional Facility with a focus on the transitional age group, and started her fellowship in forensic psychiatry this past July. She hopes to serve as an advocate for those where the onset of a psychotic disorder may coincide with involvement in the legal system. Academically, Dr. Weiss serves as the Director of Medical Student Education and Psychiatry for the Tulane School of Medicine, overseeing the psychiatric medical education for medical students throughout their 4 years of school. She also supervises residents and fellows in Tulane's Department of Psychiatry. So thank you, Dr. Weiss, for being with us today. Dr. Weiss, I will pass it off to you.
Okay, I'm really excited to be here and excited that Annette Arthur was able to provide an introduction, because I do want to say that she's been an integral part of supporting us in our journey at EPIC and our growth, and it's often the voice of reason, and has been incredibly supportive as we've grown. I titled this Being Progressive to Make Progress because I really think and have experienced that not everything that we think is clinically relevant for people actually happens unless you sometimes think outside of the box and, really believe in what you're doing. And that's what this team has really done in Louisiana to grow early psychosis intervention. The team is always being creative and trying to figure out how to make it work in a system that sometimes doesn't actually support you as well as it should. So I hope that everybody can hear me well. If you can't, please, put it in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll try to speak up. So some disclosures. I don't have any commercial disclosures. We do have community block grant funding through the SAMHSA, through the set aside. And my last disclosure is that some of my slides have been adapted from Vinod Srihari, who is my mentor and collaborator at Yale. Most of you probably know that Dr. Srihari started the STEP clinic at Yale. And anytime I speak about my work and our work here in New Orleans, I often, I all of the time, give my thanks to Dr. Srihari, because he's been an integral part of my training and first episode work, but also giving me the guidance as to how to build something from nothing. I was in my residency, and I did my residency at Tulane, and I had a patient referred to me that had first begun experiencing psychosis. He was in his early 20s at the time. The work that I had done throughout residency up to that point was primarily inpatient. And I always wondered about my young patients that were first experiencing psychosis, and I wondered what happened to them after they left inpatient, because we didn't follow them. There was no clinic to follow them. So when I was referred this young man, I was his psychiatrist, and I prescribed medication. I also had the luxury of being a resident, so I could see him weekly, even 2 to 3 times a week if needed. So I was his psychotherapist. I met with his family on several occasions to sort of help them understand what was going on and what his experiences were. I met with his friends at one point when he traveled across the country. I was his case manager. I was constantly trying to gather documentation when he had a couple setbacks after a move. And I realized in caring and being a part of his journey that I was sort of filling in these multiple roles. And I started looking into the literature and stumbled upon the first episode psychosis literature. And this was at the time that RAISE was just being implemented in the United States. So I stumbled upon the STEP clinic at Yale and literally cold called Dr. Srihari, who magically accepted my call and didn't think I was just a bizarre stalker. And we had many meetings from that point on, because I really wanted to learn what they were doing at STEP, and was starting to have the idea that this is what I really wanted to do when I finished my fellowship. And so I asked Dr. Srihari, I said, so what do I need to do? What are you doing differently up there? And he said, you just provide really good care for a young person. And I said, okay, because I thought that there would be a magic algorithm. He set up a call with me to speak with Dr. Kane, with Dr. John Kane, who led RAISE. And in that call, I said, what do I need to do? I want to start a clinic. Do I need a social worker? Do I need this person? How many people do I need on a team? And he said, you just need to start seeing patients. Like, that's it, just start seeing people. And at that point in time, I was frustrated because I wanted the way, right? We all want to know the perfect way to do something, and I wasn't getting that answer. And so, now looking back, I really understand what they were saying, is that there is no there is no perfect algorithm, but there are certain approaches and certain ways of helping a young person transition through and recover from something like psychosis, and that I would be capable of it. Even as one person in my clinic seeing this young man by myself, I was sort of serving every role that now we see as a coordinated specialty care clinic. I helped him get back in school, helped him with accommodations at his job, did all of these things that were so meaningful and helpful in him recovering, and he's still a patient of mine today. So I am forever grateful to Dr. Srihari. And so now I'm going to sort of take you through our journey of starting this program and bring you up to speed at where we are now. So we'll go through the rationale for early intervention services. Everyone at this conference is very familiar with this, so I'm not going to spend too much time in that. The majority of the time is going to be focused on conceptualizing EPIC-NOLA, our clinic, establishing the clinic, and how we approach care. I will review some of our outcomes in terms of fidelity as well as clinical outcomes. And then we'll spend the end talking about our psychosis early detection campaign, and that Annette alluded to in the introduction, and it's called CALM. And I will not be upset if during this presentation people want to go on social media and like us and follow us. That would be awesome. So I'm going to start out talking a little bit about schizophrenia epidemiology, because I think it's important. You know, first episode programs that started back in Australia, you know, that the impetus was to have a greater impact on outcomes for those with schizophrenia. Mortality in this group of disorders is much higher compared to the general population in terms of infections, respiratory illnesses, endocrine illnesses, GI illnesses, and especially cardiovascular illnesses. And it is not because those with schizophrenia don't take care of themselves. It's not because some of these myths that I think have been perpetually or perpetuated throughout history. It's something about schizophrenia that leads to other medical problems that's different than just based in behavior. And most disturbing is that 50 to 60% of premature mortality from medical illness in patients with serious mental illnesses is from cardiovascular disease. People with schizophrenia die on average 20 years sooner than those without, and that's very disturbing to me. Should be disturbing to everyone. And the suicide rate is incredibly high, and highest after somebody's first episode of psychosis. And while I realize that the first episode of psychosis is not always associated with schizophrenia, there is a large group that is. So we have to remember in the back of our minds when we are seeing psychosis in the onset of schizophrenia that we're dealing with a really, really a very serious illness at times that carries a lot of burden, especially later in life. And so the shift to first episode psychosis came from literature showing that delays in treatment are associated with adverse functional and clinical outcomes. Everyone here in this conference is aware of this. And the evidence from across the world shows that early intervention improves outcomes when compared to standard of care. Therefore, this comprehensive approach is becoming the gold standard of care and sort of reshaping our knowledge of the schizophrenia spectrum disorders. So it's an exciting time, especially in the United States, which is even more newly involved with first episode psychosis. But we have a lot to learn from what's happening also internationally when it comes to early intervention. So this is a slide courtesy from Dr. Sahari. And this yellow line represents sort of historically what we understand of the course of schizophrenia. This line is looking at function. So we can see back here, and this is age down here at the bottom, that there is some potential decline in function that happens even before someone's first episode. And then from what we know of historically, there's this relapse and remitting type of situation that happens in the beginning and ultimately coming up to a less acute state, but for people later on in life, lower functioning than would be expected of someone in the general population at the same age. And I always look at this and think that this is what we think we know based on historical research and based on a population that did not receive early intervention for psychosis. I'm definitely an idealist, but I would like to think that in 20 years, if someone was doing this presentation, when we talk about the course of schizophrenia, that this actually looks a lot different now that we're providing appropriate treatments for those early on first experiencing psychosis related to schizophrenia. So as I said, this is really where the onset is. You guys just had a clinical high-risk talk that focused on this point in time. And this is where our critical period of intervention happens with the first episode. So this is where first episode clinics are targeting their treatment. So in early intervention services, Dr. Sahari definitely likes to approach this from a two-pronged standpoint, that there's the intensive treatment that happens in the first 2 to 5 years. United States has coined this term coordinated specialty care, but basically it's treatment targeting those first experiencing psychosis. The 2 to 5 years piece is debatable. As Annette said, I'm a child psychiatrist by training, and I think that doctors that care for young people, especially kids, have this fantasy that they could be their doctor forever, because there is a tendency to get very involved, not only with the person in your care, but also with their family, because that's what we do when we're taking care of kids. And we also like to be involved in school, and we like to be involved in helping them make friends. So it's not just about the medication management per se, it's about helping someone throughout developmental process. So when I think about what our intensive treatment will be, and actually what we do at EPIC, we don't have a cutoff. You know, we're now at 5 years and still have people that get care from our clinic that have been with us from the very, very beginning. Because we just believe that clinically that is what is indicated in order to help someone recover. So this came out of research that intervention intensively after onset of psychosis improves outcomes over usual care. And there is a slew of papers and research studies that have examined this. What are these interventions? They're adapted from those with severe mental illnesses to younger patients, to teenagers, to young adults. And it's very phase specific. So what is needed in someone that is 65 is going to look different than what's needed in someone that's 18. And the focus is reducing relapse, keeping people well, and keeping people on their developmental trajectory, keeping them moving forward. And so then the second prong is the early detection piece. As it's been said in this conference already, that the shorter duration of untreated psychosis is associated with better outcomes as far as we know. And so shortening DUP becomes complicated because this is actually starting to capture people that are not yet seeking help. And so these are people in the community that might just started having different experiences, potentially psychosis experiences, that have not yet sought help. So how do we get out there and try to identify people early when we know that the earlier we identify them, probably the better that they're going to actually do when they come to a program that provides care. So a little bit about RAISE. And this is a one-slide version of a project that could be a full presentation, but it's important for us just to review it. The early treatment component of RAISE looked at the question, is comprehensive care better than usual? And the implementation and evaluation part, looking at what are the best ways to start using a coordinated specialty care program. The big takeaway messages are that coordinated specialty care or comprehensive care for early psychosis is more effective than usual care, cost effective, and it's most effective in those with a shorter duration of untreated psychosis, which is pretty powerful for when we later start talking about how do we provide better early detection. These are two pictures actually that I took at IEPA, a conference that's been referenced before. This was from 2018, where you can see back in 2008, there were less than 20 programs in the United States. And then there's been a huge shift and a huge shift in attention nationally to early intervention, which is fantastic, and a huge growth in clinics. There's, I think, more than 300 clinics now, because this is obviously out of date, being 2018. And then I just like to point out that, you know, here we are in Louisiana, although the yellow dot is not quite on New Orleans. Maybe it's more South Central's new program. But that most states actually have early intervention clinic, which is fantastic. So using the rationale I've described and evidence-based, evidence-informed practices, we began building our early intervention service in New Orleans. So our CSC part is our clinic. It's EPIC-NOLA, Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic. Those of you guys not from New Orleans, it might be confusing about the NOLA part, but basically it stands for New Orleans, Louisiana. And we get very proud of where we're from and, you know, have established that the shorthand for New Orleans, Louisiana is NOLA. So that's why we named ourselves this. And we also, you know, from the beginning began to conceptualize the early detection piece. Dr. Serena Chaudhry, who is our clinical director, and I both have a background in public health. And so providing individual care is important, and equally as important to us from the beginning was providing our community care and taking a public health approach to early psychosis treatment. So I'll tell you more about CALM later, but I had someone not show up for an appointment one day and decided to launch a crowd raising campaign because I really wanted to have a program that was similar to Mind Map, which was Dr. Sahari's early detection campaign in New Haven. So that's how CALM actually started, and we'll talk more about it as we move forward. So going through the logistics. In early 2015, we put together a community academic partnership. So I was faculty at Tulane, and I contracted with a local community mental health agency called Schizophrenia Family Services. And what we did was they agreed to have me on and provide 8 hours of psychiatric care because they needed a general psychiatrist with some child psychiatry time as well. And within this agreement was the idea that I would probably have an hour to 2 hours of that 8 hours that I could start building out this clinic and start recruiting first episode psychosis patients. And so with this, their Symphonia had already had a family therapist on staff, and they let me borrow 4 hours a week from his time. And then they brought on Dr. Chaudhry here for 4 hours a week as well to provide psychotherapy. So it was the three of us with a very small window during the week that we could provide all of these services for individuals that were referred to us. Moving forward, in late 2016, and because of the passing of legislation mandating the set aside of funds for early intervention, we were able to take our data of about 20 patients that we had been seeing regularly. We took our data to the state, and I had a meeting with the state to advocate that we receive part of the set aside funding based on our positive outcomes. And that is when our relationship with Louisiana Department of Health started. And we were able to expand service. We were able to hire a peer support specialist. We were able to hire another psychotherapist, and we were able to get some help managing our intakes. New Orleans is a very under-resourced city in terms of mental health. So when we opened our doors and we made it public that we were providing early intervention services, we got referrals instantly. So we grew very quickly. And then there was a push for us to become part of Tulane only. And this was part of the, part of our growth and part of Symphonia's growth. We were moving in two different directions. And so starting in November of 2018, I actually began having conversations with the chair of our department at Tulane to take over our clinical services under administration of Tulane. And so we became part of Tulane exclusively, and we set up the Tulane Doctors Specialty Psychiatry Clinic. Tulane Department of Psychiatry does not have many, well, actually, they did not have any outpatient mental health clinics. And so we were sort of an experiment, you could say. Could we have an outpatient practice that would be sustainable? We also opened it up for clinicians that had interest in other areas of mental health that were more specialty based, that we could be a part of and that they could be a part of this clinic. So within Tulane Doctors Specialty Psychiatry, there is also a program that focuses on perinatal mental health. So women that are pregnant, women that have just recently had babies, and providing care for them during that time, which is another specialty within mental health. So our approach at EPIC, I put these pictures because I love them, and I think that they're pretty representative of characteristics of our city. This is Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras, I think, kind of represents us culturally in the fact that not only do people like to have fun, but we like to gather, we like to celebrate, historical, our history. People love the carnival atmosphere. And with that said, though, there's also the aspects of New Orleans as a community that haven't been so positive, that we also have to, that we had to pay attention to in terms of looking at our approach. We're a vibrant city, but also a city with a lot of historical trauma and a lot of current trauma in terms of the amount of violence that occurs, and the amount of struggle that our youth go through here in our city every day. These are my kids. Everybody here loves to dress up, and I like this picture because they just look like they're fighters and look very strong. And that was definitely part of our approach at EPIC, is that we wanted to be strength-based and focus on empowerment. And this is just a beautiful picture of the river with the city behind, in a park that's been built in one of our under-resourced neighborhoods. So looking at our approach, of course, there's an extensive review of the literature. On first episode, Psychosis, I was provided training through STEP. I also took part in Navigate training, did some site visits up at Yale, and then sort of taking all of this knowledge and then overlaying it with what our community needs here down in New Orleans. That is how we established our approach at EPIC. And I want to keep in mind that our approach is ever evolving as we get more experienced, and as we experience each unique person and each unique family. It definitely informs how we move forward and evolve our practice. So, for example, here's the big picture of our foundation. And I talk about our foundation because it informs how we then practice in terms of our psychotherapy approach, in terms of our approach to psychoeducation, in terms of our approach to families. So, these are really important. This is a really important slide for me because I think it provides our background to then talk about how we do what we do on an everyday basis. So, of course, the appreciation of developmental milestones, appreciation of each individual in their own development, and where their strengths are, as well as where someone has struggled with meeting certain milestones that are important for them. Understanding the science of psychosis as best that we can. And this is super complicated. However, I think that, there is a way to distill down some of the science to help make sense for some people about potential reasons that they might be going through what they are. And then trying to link that science to symptoms, but not just symptoms, helping to link the science to the person's experience. And it might be experience of the symptom, or it might not be at all. And in order to get to the facilitation of growth of self, of encouraging self-compassion, building of families, building of communities, we have to really understand each individual and what their experience might be, that we can move forward and help them towards recovery. And so using our experience with people with their families, that's been informative to how we're pursuing early detection in our community. So just to sort of give an example of how we're going to do this, I'm going to give a shout out to the Psychosis and Emotions book later on in my talk, but this book was heavily influential in how we sort of saw the foundation of our psychotherapy and our psychoeducational program. So how do we link science to symptoms? We know that there are 4 areas of information processing that those with schizophrenia struggle with. And those include sensory processing, affective processing, cognitive processing, and social processing. And there's a chapter in this book that actually lays this out very nicely. And with those information processing changes in mind, we're automatically going to be curious about someone's emotional reactions to them and behavior change that might happen in response to having these information processing changes that are happening in mental states. So for instance, someone with a sensory processing challenge, they might be sensitive to loud noises. So it makes sense that going to the mall, going to the movies, being in environments that are overstimulating might pose certain challenges to someone. They might not want to go there. So if their behavior of avoiding parties is because of sensitivity to loud noises, it makes sense that they're not going to go. So then we can use that in educating them and educating their families about why their loved one is not so into going to parties anymore, that there is some sensitivity to all of this extrasensory input that's happening. Cognitive processing, so struggles with remaining on task. We encourage people to go back to school. We encourage and help them with getting back to school, with getting jobs, but we also have to take a step back and appreciate that if someone is struggling with working memory, with task completion, that even the simple task of signing up for a college class on the computer can become like insurmountable. Especially for someone that type of thing used to come to them easily. They're now experiencing a struggle with it. So we have to focus sometimes not on the big picture of going back to school, but just feeling confident and relearning and learning again how to complete these tasks in a way that works for them. In terms of affective processing and the tendency to potentially misread facial cues, how does that affect relationships if that's happening? And social processing, assuming that someone 100% knows what someone else is thinking. I'm going to get to some of our group work in a minute, but we pay a lot of attention to social cognition. And this is something that even those with psychosis, it becomes very important in order to maintain relationships, to be flexible and not to jump to conclusions about what's going on in someone's mind. If someone comes in feeling paranoid and distrustful, then we have to explore, where is that coming from? Is it part of a social processing change? Is it because you're jumping to conclusions about what one may be thinking? And how do we address that in order to then help someone establish relationships that feel meaningful, that feel comfortable and trusting? So another question that we get asked a lot, especially by families, is why is this happening? Why is this happening to my loved one? Why is this happening to me? And we try to base it in what we know from a science standpoint, is that we know that there's this very complicated interaction with genetics, with the environment, that has influences coming from socioeconomic disparities like poverty, like inequality in terms of access to care, and that it's never one's fault. But there's this complicated interaction that's happening with multiple forces that can lead to psychosis. And so now moving forward in terms of the components of our program, with what I've been talking about in the background as driving forces of what we're doing. So what are our treatment components? Medication management with add-on therapy. So there's not a psychiatrist that works in our clinic that doesn't spend time with our patients. We train residents, train child adolescent psychiatry fellows, and it is imperative that people are treated in the most careful and conservative way in order to make decisions about medicines, and that there's so much to learn about a medicine and about how it affects you as an individual over time, not just in the moment, but over time. So our approach to medication management is extremely conservative. We see people weekly to start out with. I think I have a handful of people that I might see every 2 months now, because we believe that it's important for consistency, for continuity, and to really get to know someone not only when they're struggling, but also when they're really well. I'll have patients want to cancel appointments because they say that they're doing fine, they don't need to see me, and I have to retell them that this is part of treatment, is me learning who you are when you're really feeling at your best. Then I have an actual opportunity for when I see you not feeling your best to be able to point that out. And if I don't know all of these parts of you, then I'm not able to do my job as well as I could. Another component is the individual psychoeducation and psychotherapy, education and employment support. And all of us participate in the education and employment support piece. It's not someone's specific job. We all participate in some way in helping people get back to work and get back into a school, get the accommodations that they may need, etc. Family psychoeducation and psychotherapy, also a big part. We have a lot of people that come from very traumatic backgrounds where they may not want their families involved, and family might not be the identified mother, father, or even brothers and sisters. It might be their partner, it might be friends. If someone says that they don't want their family involved, we accept that, and we also then want to try to figure out why, so that we can help address maybe some of the resistance. Maybe it's something that we can help with. Maybe it's based on misunderstanding. But we do know it's important for families to be involved during treatment. So how can we help that family reunify if they've had issues in the past that have led to some estrangement? We have group interventions of various types that I'll go into in a moment. And socialization is a big part. This happens through our peer support program. We're currently in the process of hiring a new peer support specialist, which we're very excited about. Our former peer support specialist was very active in sort of taking what we were doing in the clinic and moving it into the community. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So what is the treatment at EPIC-NOLA? What's our flow? We start out getting people oriented to the clinic. And we keep in mind that oftentimes we might be the first mental health setting that they've come into contact with. And so it's a big deal and it's confusing. The next step is joining, building rapport, The next step is getting into the psychoeducation and the psychotherapy, med management, and then ultimately creating community. And I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail. So what does this orientation look like? We like to give people a schematic of here's who we all are and what our role is, and to help sort of give them a map to the clinic, which is really important. Often people will feel that it's this, you know, it's a bunch of people that they've never met before now being very intrusive in their life. And we want to try to combat that with giving people a good understanding of what our roles are. And this is where a lot of psychoeducation happens. And psychoeducation happens across the board. It's not just from their therapist. It's not just from me. It happens throughout any interaction that you're having with someone on our team. Joining. I think the biggest take-home message that I would like to have today is how important alliance is and how important it is to build rapport, establishing a safe space, meeting individuals and families where they are, and in helping them in processing some very intense experiences and going through a grieving process if necessary, going through an acceptance process if necessary, and all the while being able to clinically learn and observe dynamics that happen between people and their identified family, and how those dynamics can influence someone potentially in their recovery. And this is where our assessment and formulation process is happening. So you're never having a one session evaluation where everything is learned. That will never happen. I think it's just clinically impossible for that to happen. But there is, you know, an assessment period, and our assessments are both clinical and structured. And so looking back at application of our foundations for treatment, I think some of the important goals are that we're all on the same page. The whole team is on the same page. We want to be on the same page with our families and with patients that we care for. We automatically assume that there might be some myths about psychosis happening even within families. So being aware of stigma that our patients may be coming up against, both at home, but and also within the community at large. Have a firm belief that psychoeducation is delivered in a therapeutic manner. It's not just worksheets. It's not just about a list of psychoeducational bullet points. It's very individualized, and it should come at a time when we feel clinically that people are able to absorb the information. We don't want to give too much information at once if people seem like they're overwhelmed. All members of the team participate in psychoeducation and participate in therapeutic interventions. So even going out into the community for a socialization event, there are going to be opportunities to help reinforce skills, reinforce ideas that one might be learning within their therapy process. Even the person that works in the front of our clinic, you know, when we're training that person, we tell them, like, you're the first person that this family, that this person that might be in crisis is going to be seeing. So you need to be mindful of that. You need to be attentive to that. You need to be attentive to the stress that someone might be going through. So you need to be welcoming and a force of calm, but have a calming sense about you so that people feel safe in our clinic. So rapport is priority from the moment someone walks into the clinic until they might graduate our program. all of us believe that our patients should have access to psychotherapy interventions, which are not time limited. And the approach should be evidence-based, evidence-informed, and individualized. And we're under the assumption that as formulation evolves over time, that the psychotherapy focus is also going to probably shift over time. So if we're starting out with a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, and if it doesn't seem to be working for some reason, then we discuss that as a team. We discuss maybe where we are thinking about this the wrong way. We talk with the patient about maybe why this isn't working for them. So if our therapists need to alter their approach, then that's okay. So in speaking about our psychotherapy framework, we do a lot with narrative approaches and meaning making, paying attention to attachment and the idea that recovery of self and that keeping self integrated throughout recovery can be key to someone having a more successful recovery and growing. You know, I will say that those of us, the members of this team each have their strengths. We have people that are very strong in cognitive behavioral therapy. I have a strong background in psychodynamic, more insight-oriented therapies. We have someone in the team that does EMDR. We have someone that's been trained in focused family therapy, functional family therapy. So everybody has strengths, and so we all use these different viewpoints to help inform how we're taking care of people over time. Trauma-informed approaches, incredibly important, especially in a city like New Orleans, where a lot of our young people will come in and they've had multiple traumas. For those of you familiar with the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, their ACE score is, you know, way too high for any of us to be comfortable with. So we have to keep in mind that engagement is going to potentially be difficult when people have had multiple trauma experiences and have a very potentially chronic post-traumatic stress disorder underlying that, or that was there before onset of psychosis. CBT and metacognition, obviously, very common uses or common approaches to therapy within first episode psychosis. And we use CBT in our clinic as well. As I said, I alluded to this book earlier. For those of you who have not read it, it sort of like changed my life, if I'm going to be dramatic, when I read it in residency. And then this book we're reading now as a team about integration of CBT approaches with psychodynamic treatment. And so, like I was talking about us not having a limit on time, and that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of our approach to psychotherapy. I've been asked many times, how do we make that happen from a financial standpoint? And I say to them that is how we've grown. We didn't start out with a team of 8 people. We started growing incrementally as the need was coming in from the community. So we've been able to build our clinic based on community need. When I needed additional psychiatry time, that's when I was able to advocate for adding on psychiatry time. When our people's caseloads were getting too big, that's when I was able to advocate for our administration to let us add on a clinician. So we are keeping finances in mind, but we're also wedded to the idea that continuity of care is incredibly important. So just because you've been with us for 2 years, 3 years, doesn't mean that you have to leave because we're not able to adapt our clinical team in order to keep you in treatment if that's what's needed. We try to adapt for what our patient population needs instead of the reverse. So looking at family psychoeducation, we do a lot of education about what a brain does as it's growing up, what happens during adolescence in terms of brain development. I think that we do a lot of education about typical development. So families might be concerned about things that are really not related to psychosis at all. They're more related to typical struggles that, you know, every 21-year-old goes through. And so I'll bring up this this chart that we'll use. I'm sorry, it probably looks small, from ACAP, which just goes through typical physical, cognitive, social, emotional development. So we can say, you know, yes, your 20-year-old is struggling with deciding what they want to do with their life. However, this is a time that they're typically trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. So this is totally normal. We have used the Just the Facts program from Navigate that has some good psychoeducational tools as well. Moving on to our group interventions. How to creatively move from within the clinic into the community, which is obviously the goal. Challenges to group. I think there are many challenges to having groups across the board. Some of the common experiences with our first episode clients will be the fact that this is their first experience with mental health professionals, and they might not really trust that group is a good place for them. Maybe feeling more withdrawn or feeling more isolated, not feeling as motivated. It's just another appointment that they have to attend in a pretty intensive treatment plan. So all of the credit here goes to Michael Dyer, who's our program manager, but he had started our group program and was really struggling with how to engage people in group. And, you know, he's originally from Louisiana, and, you know, we talked about it as a team, and he's like, I kind of want to cook for everyone. You know, this is something that's common to our community, gathering for a meal. Could this be not an incentive and not a bribery tool, but a way to connect with people? So let's come, have a meal, and then we can talk about some of the things that we would like to talk about related to first episode treatment. And he, on his own, would, on Sundays, make a crock pot of something and bring it to the clinic, which was a really amazing experience to watch. And that helped our group program grow tremendously. They began telling them, they began having certain requests, you know, that they would like for their Monday group meal. Our clinical environment. When we joined with Tulane, we had the opportunity to do some redecorating, so to speak. And so we were very intentional about trying to create a space that was inviting, that didn't feel like a hospital, didn't feel like even like a clinic, and provide space just for gathering. So you can't see it in this picture, but where behind where this picture is, there's actually couches. there's a TV with a PlayStation. And this room will sort of become a gathering space for before group and even after group, where people will just hang out and talk, and get to know each other. What we do in terms of our group treatment modality is social cognitive interaction training, otherwise known as SCIT. SCIT was developed by Dr. Roberts, and it was an intervention actually developed on an inpatient unit focused on improving social functioning by targeting the mental operations that underlie social interactions, which we know is social cognition. And so this ultimately is making sense of what others are thinking and feeling and doing. It's promising in the sense that social cognition has a lot of evidence in improving social functioning in schizophrenia and those with psychosis. And it's been very well received in the first episode Psychosis group that we work with in New Orleans. It is a group treatment. However, there is individual lessons that are very useful. So not only will we use SCIT in a group setting, those of us in individual appointments, especially if we know someone is going through the SCIT series, we will try to reinforce that in our individual time with people. Looking at our socialization groups, which is the big part of our peer support program. Our peer support specialists led weekly outings. She was able to get do some fundraising, get a lot of donations from community members in terms of like museum passes to the aquarium, things like that. And the group wouldn't be so large such that it was intimidating. And we wanted to really give everyone a chance. So she would take small groups of people out. She would also attend SCIT, not as a participant, but she knew what was going on with SCIT and would emphasize sort of practicing those skills in these community environments. And so it served as an informal group sharing and processing of what was going on, but also as a practice of getting back out in the community and what it felt like. She took people to the planetarium, to restaurants, to the zoo, to the museum, and is very popular. And we hope that when our next peer support specialist comes on board, that we're able to continue with that. Our wellness groups have been really fun. We've been able to make connections within the community to other like-minded organizations that have intentions of sort of community building. For instance, we partnered with a local fitness studio and raised some funds for our patients to be able to go and have boxing classes. And this isn't traditional boxing in a ring. It's boxing to the beat of music in an environment that's kind of dark. There's lots of lights, lots of good music, but it also requires people to pay a lot of attention. The instructor will be calling out different counts. So people are having to attend to what he's saying, follow directions, and also there's a lot of sensory input happening. And I would go sometimes and was just amazed at how easy it was for people that were really struggling a lot with like hearing voices, with other types of experiences, and seeing them kind of get in the zone and be able to exercise, number one, but also be really focused and concentrating, for 30 minutes. It was just awesome. This is the part where I will admittedly admit that when we have residents and fellows and medical students come into the clinic, and they do frequently, I will often capitalize on other strengths that they have or other interests that they might have. For instance, our child psychiatry fellow has an interest in meditation and has put together a weekly meditation group now for the last year. It's allowed for her to sort of gain more experience in leading meditation groups. It's also helpful for us because we have this group to offer to our patients. Our community engagement specialist, she is very artistic, and she has arranged these EPIC art groups where we don't have an art therapist on staff per se, but she has experience with all of our patients and pretty much knows everybody because of her role in the clinic. And so she will have like silent painting, or she'll have a certain theme. And so it doesn't feel like it's an intervention. It feels like it's a gathering for like a social gathering or a wellness type of gathering. Our clinic is a site for fourth-year medical students to do a community health elective. So these are not students primarily that are going into psychiatry necessarily, but we are a site where people can come and do a community health elective. And we had one student who was a former professional soccer player, so he put together this 4-week soccer series. We had another person that did basketball. But needless to say, this is proven to be really a creative way of kind of keeping the clinic changing, having new things to do at different times. COVID has presented many challenges. That's not what this talk is about. But we're always trying to figure out how we can keep the group dynamic happening even during struggles. We actually were able to hire a wellness coach, which has been fantastic, as we have so many people that are dealing with weight gain from medicines, dealing with metabolic syndrome, dealing with having to now pay attention to diet and exercise, and helping them learning these skills. So we've been, creating community in the clinic has been incredibly important. Examples that I've given you thus far. And then we also have groups that support families. We have a moms group that sort of organically evolved by a group of moms that decided that they wanted their own group to process what they're dealing with. I'm awaiting that we'll probably have a dad's group. But we, so we as a team talked about, is this not right to have this group where dads aren't invited? However, we also wanted to respect this certain group of moms' desire to come together and let them have their space. And it's been a really positive experience for the clinician that leads that group. So looking at benchmarks, I'm looking at our time and realize I need to go a little bit faster. So are we actually doing things that meet fidelity? So we had Dr. Addington come in 2019, and we did the fidelity scale to ourselves. And we also look at more population-based outcomes for our population and keep ourselves on benchmarks established by STEP and Dr. Shahari. And these include looking at rehospitalization and also engagement in the program from individuals and from families. So for those of you not familiar with the Addington First Episode Psychosis Services Fidelity Scale, this is just a snapshot of one of the domains. So you can see that timely contact with referred individual, that if the person is offered an in-person appointment within 2 weeks, If you do that in 80% or more of your patients, then you get a 5. And there are many of these anchor points that you have to go through with your cohort of patients. So we received a 4.3 out of 5, which was pretty exciting. The things that we did not score well on was the psychiatry caseload, and this was the impetus for us getting more psychiatry hours. Clozapine, we didn't have the predicted number on clozapine that that the research would expect. We also lost points on documentation of offering medication discontinuation 1 year post-remission, documentation of family participation in treatment, and documented use of a formal treatment plan. So these are all things that we've addressed. So I'm hoping next time we do the evaluation, we'll get a 5. Looking at a snapshot of our referrals up until, this is up till November 2019. I apologize for not calculating or not running this data analysis up to current. It's just the pandemic has not allowed for that. But if we look at the data up till November of last year, we've had a total of 323 referrals, treated 201 patients, 104 were active at that point in time, and 97 inactive. So those were people that were active at one point, but not active at that point in time. 27 referred out, 99 were referred, but we were unable to engage them, unable to reach them. So 72% had Medicaid as insurance, 22% commercial, and 6% did not have insurance. And we still see people even if they do not have insurance. Of a cohort of 178 of people that we treated, this is the breakdown of diagnoses. I'm not going to go through it in depth. We do see affective psychosis in our clinic as well. Moving forward to looking at benchmarks set by step, we picked 3 that we thought would be really important as we were starting to grow the clinic. Exposure to family education, exposure to individual psychotherapy, and hospitalization within the first year after enrollment at EPIC. And when we look at results for family sessions, we were at 73%, and you can see right here the standards on the right side where there's achievable benchmarks and aspirational benchmarks, and we were at 73%. Adherence to individual sessions was at 94%, and admission to the hospital within a year after enrollment in our clinic was at about 13%. Moving on to look at our referral sources, 64% came from inpatient, which does not make me happy because that means that they've had to be inpatient before. Outpatient mental health was 22%, self-referrals 11%, justice system 1%, and the emergency room 1%. 0 from primary care at that point in time. Actually, this was up to the end of June. Since then, we've had 2 from primary care, which I consider successful, I guess, but that's a whole other conversation. But this 11% was really exciting because that meant that people or their families actually were help seeking and found us to come to. So when we gave our program assessment a snapshot, we gave ourselves a gold ribbon because there's a lot of people being referred. We have on average 15 referrals a month. However, why is there this big percentage that we're unable to reach? Because that means that for them, their duration of untreated psychosis is increasing. And then how do we identify people earlier than them having to go to the hospital? So sort of giving a big 4-year snapshot before we move into early detection. Our questions are we providing quality care at EPIC-NOLA? And we did the fidelity scale and felt secure with the fact that we are meeting fidelity standards. Integrating education, we've been able to have medical students, residents, and fellows train with us, which is wonderful because it increases their exposure to best practices in treating first episode psychosis. We just started with social work interns and have 2 currently. Moving forward with the state, we've been able to be present for monthly calls for 2 years now, providing consultation to smaller programs. We provided some trainings throughout the state in 2019 on first episode treatment. Looking at expanding services in the state, we're helping one region who's actually on this call or on this Zoom conference right now. We're in weekly consultation with them while they're establishing their first episode program. And then looking at expanding early detection, with CALM, our early detection program, and that's what we're going to spend the last part of this talk discussing. So back to this slide, I talked about EPIC-NOLA, which is our clinic, and then how do we further early detection? And this comes from the question of what happens to individuals with psychosis in Louisiana, because we know that there is a complicated network delivering suboptimal pathways. This is a snapshot of Louisiana looking at the various regions. And we also have privatized Medicaid in our state, which means we have multiple Medicaid groups. So the process is very, very complicated to establish care. And we know that 1% to 3% annually are first experiencing psychosis. At some point, the illness or the symptom of psychosis is identified. At some point, somebody is help seeking, and they're either diagnosed or referred somewhere and then receive treatment. And so this is kind of what it looks like. It's a complicated process, therefore duration of untreated psychosis is at more risk of increasing for these individuals. So what STEP did in New Haven through the MyMap campaign was work to integrate networks and ultimately trying to reduce duration of untreated psychosis by providing a more linear pathway from first psychosis experience to engaging with a first episode psychosis service. That way, potentially DUP will decrease. There's some interesting studies about early detection campaigns in other countries, in the UK and in Norway, for those of you that want to look at some of the background for this. The approach, there's going to be a media campaign. There'll be mass media and social media, professional outreach and detailing, and insurance that there could be rapid access to EPIC-NOLA for us for STEP through the MyMap campaign if needed. So this is where CALM was born out of, and our goal is to help New Orleans better understand and treat psychosis. What we do is provide psychoeducation. So these are some pictures from our website. There's going to be a lot of pictures moving forward and sort of describing CALM, but trying to provide accurate information about what psychosis is, trying to dispel myths and reduce stigma surrounding psychosis, and also trying to encourage people to seek treatment and that early treatment works. We're very involved in the community. This was a medical student at a fundraising event that we had. We will go to various health fairs, things like that, and we always present with our clinical arm and also our educational arm, because there might be someone that doesn't need our clinical services, but might just want to be educated about psychosis. And then presenting. and presenting really anywhere that we can. This was a presentation at ISPS US back in November. Again, social media, this is where our demographic, our age group spends a lot of time sometimes, so being active within social media, and we have done some mass marketing as well. So what we did was rebrand our clinic to sort of match the branding of Calm, and late 2019, we were given the opportunity to put together a proposal for Baptist Community Ministries. This is their logo right here. And to try to relaunch Calm and to actually have some funding to push our agenda. We wanted to increase inquiries about psychosis and also increase number of referrals for those first experiencing psychosis, but it to not come from the hospital and to actually come from Calm messaging itself. So what our campaign looked like was that we put together a multimedia approach. We put together a plan for some specific detailing, in particular, social venues, schools, healthcare providers, and also trying to engage with key stakeholders that we've, from experience, have identified as needing to be engaged in a dialogue about psychosis and how we intersect with these groups within the community. I'm going to skip through this. So looking at our community outreach, we had focus groups at EPIC-NOLA to sort of talk with patients, talk with their families about how we should go about educating our community and the important things for them were. We've had one town hall meeting, 2 are scheduled to occur within the next couple of months. And those were focused on the intersection between psychosis and spirituality, education, and law enforcement. We've had tables at multiple healthcare events, and we also had a lot of detailing happening during Mardi Gras. These are my 2 other children. They're our youngest Calm ambassadors. When we look at the potential impact on self-referral, since we started the relaunch of the campaign, you can see here that, like I had told you guys before, 11% of our referrals that were self-referrals as of December 2019. In the first quarter of 2020, 16% of our referrals from those 3 months came from self-referrals, and 2 of them had seen information from Calm. The quarter from April, May, and June, we had 9 self-referrals, which brought it to 26% of the total referrals, and 6 of them had seen something Calm related. So you can see that we're headed in we're heading in the right direction. Of course, this is just preliminary looks at number and not assuming causality. Looking at our preliminary mass marketing results, we've had 1 referral from a bus ad. I am known to jump out of my car, take a selfie of me in front of the bus, even if it's, well, sometimes it's been a little bit dangerous. So you can see there on the bus interiors and then on the bus exteriors. And then this is my youngest, outside of the bus shelter. And the messaging sounds intense. However, we wanted it to be intense, but also, providing a number, providing a website, providing something that someone could do in order to ask questions if they were having experiences that may be psychosis. Looking at social media, we've had an increase of 62% of our followers on Instagram over the last 6 months. In Facebook, we've also had a doubling in our page likes. And just in the last 28 days, you can see that some of our postings have reached have had a reach of over 5,000. And I think that social media is a very powerful player here in terms of early detection. One thing that I didn't think about before was a benefit of social media being establishing online relationships with other psychosis social media influencers. And so when we connect to these other groups throughout the world, our content is invisible to their followers. So we have made multiple connections with groups online. There's these groups doing really amazing things in terms of advocacy, education. I did an interview with Living Well with Schizophrenia actually this past Saturday. But even some of our patients have been able to reach out like to students with psychosis and at least have the option of not only having peer support locally here, but also having peer support within the social media realm. So in closing, ultimately our goal, similar to Mind Map's goal, is that we can provide a more direct pathway for someone that's first experiencing psychosis to getting to our clinic. I think future directions for us involve measuring DUP and seeing if what we're doing has an impact on our community duration of untreated psychosis, and also for decreasing help-seeking episodes. So we really aim for us to be the first person, the first group that someone would reach out to if they thought that their experiences were changing, if they thought that they may be experiencing psychosis. This was us before we were heading up to ISPS in November, pre-pandemic, when we could all hang out. And so this is kind of our journey, and this is this amazing team that I work with. I'm very proud of the fact that we've had one person turn over in our whole 5 years of being a team, which I think speaks to the level of commitment that everyone on this team has to changing the trajectory for those first experiencing psychosis. I really appreciate everyone's attention, and thank you for your time. Here's my email address if you have any questions. And it's 4:27, so I think we have a little bit of time for, and my references are here if you want them, but I think we probably have a little bit of time left for questions. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer, but now I got to figure out how to do my stop share. Okay, stop share.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise. I know we might be going a little bit over, but we do have several questions in the Q&A pod, so I encourage everybody to stick around for that. So I will let Christina Marshall, licensed clinical social worker, behavioral health supervisor from the POWER program at the Center for Health Center Services, lead us through our Q&A portion today.
Okay, awesome.
Hi there, Dr. Weiss. Thank you so much for your amazing presentation. We've had such good feedback and a lot of great questions. And with our limited time, I might kind of combine some of the questions here.
Sure.
Landy asks, have you had any feedback from patients regarding the increased frequency of visits, the intensity level being a challenge or burdensome to them? What has been y'all's experiences, and how do you address those challenges with transportation, time commitment?
So we provide home community-based services as well. So if there's inconveniences surrounding transportation, then our clinicians, of course I'm speaking like pre-pandemic, life has changed dramatically since, but we are able to go see people in the community. We will always ask why, you know, and what is the concern, and what is it that's like leading you to feel like this is too much. We will talk about it as a team as well to determine if we need to drop back in frequency. If someone's going to work a lot, you know, which is, it's not a bad problem to have, but I like when people are like, Dr. Weiss, I can't come because I'm working. And I'm like, okay, great. I'll fit you in some other time because it's fantastic that you're at your job. So we don't start out saying that this is what has to happen. You have to be here this many number of times and this many sessions, because it is a very individualized approach, and we're flexible. You know, we're flexible with people, and try to meet them where they are.
Mentioning COVID and how we've all faced so many challenges with that, how would you say that you've been able to continue or adapt, adjust, providing socialization and group and services in general?
Yeah, so we've gone 100% Zoom now. And honestly, our show rate has increased, I think because people are comfortable being at home. The group piece is challenging. We tried to start a round of skit through Zoom, and we were not successful. There were, it was maybe one participant, but that was all. There was also some question about the specific people we were working with being a good group for skit. We've maintained our meditation group, which is well attended every week. And then our wellness coach works on an individual basis. So it kind of came at the right time. So he was able to start making these phone calls to people to set up weekly check-ins about wellness on their own time. So they weren't sort of, wedded to a specific time. Our moms group has continued virtually without any setback. So, but we do worry about even ourselves and our whole team being so isolated because we're so used to kind of being together, and we get a lot of energy from each other. And it's been a challenge for sure.
Our keynote speaker from this morning, Dr. Jones, has asked a question. Have you all tracked engagement, disengagement, and discharge rates? Do you know how many clients get through at least a year of treatment, and how many stay past the 2 years?
I don't have this specific numbers. We're actually looking at that data, and through a project looking at our pathways to care. If I were to guess, I would say that more than 50% are with us for a year. And then as we get further, the number gets smaller, obviously. We have about 30 people who have been with us that I know for sure that I could name that have been with us for 3+ years. And honestly, a few of those, it took that long for us to really gain enough rapport for them to start trusting. I'm always amazed at, it's like just when you think someone's gonna never come back or like they never want to come back and see you again, something shifts, and they may be ready. So I will include Nev, Dr. Jones in that conversation when we actually have those numbers, because now we're coming at our 5-year mark. We're sort of really wanting to look at the differentiation between the people that are with us a short amount of time versus those that are with us for 1+ years, 2+ years, and so on, now that we have actual data.
Andrew shares such an impressive and holistic approach on how to serve folks, given the complexity of some people having to take the neuroleptic medication, smoking issues. He's wondering how the folks you serve may access primary care services.
Yep, so we ensure that people are connected to their primary care provider. That's something that our nurse works on from the very beginning. So when they come to us, you know, they might have not seen a primary care provider since they graduated from pediatrics. And especially with the use of urgent care now, it's like a difficult process to sort of restart this. Okay, we're gonna check lab work and you're gonna need to see your primary care doctor, and we kind of get them back into this rhythm. And next step for us is bringing in our own primary care provider into our clinic, to just have somebody, you know, there a day a week just doing wellness exams and wellness checks. That's on the agenda, because we would like to just kind of do it in-house ourselves to be more coordinated.
And Michelle asks us, are there any existing or developed models or practice guides for how early psychosis education campaigns may specifically target traditionally underrepresented and marginalized groups?
No, this is not a well-researched or well-developed approach. You know, there's 2 campaigns that happened internationally that showed some impact on DUP when they had their community education campaign happening. And that was sort of laid the groundwork for what Dr. Sahari and the STEP Clinic did with their Mind Map campaign. When we were kind of brand building with Calm, we had the same people come that did mind maps. So they already had some knowledge about psychosis, because they had already had that from the mind map like when they were developing the mind map campaign. But they came down to New Orleans and kind of did a site visit and incorporated kind of what message we were trying to send to a very traumatized and marginalized group. And so the color, everything was sort of thought out to sort of be, to provide sort of a sense of safety, even though we're discussing something really intense. And we went through lots of iterations of the brand of the, you know, like the C, and with focus groups and stuff. And it was just really interesting to have the feedback. You know, one of the logos that I really liked, a New Haven focus group, said it reminded them of Hurricane Katrina. And I was like, I didn't even think about that, but I certainly don't want a logo that's reminiscent of Hurricane Katrina, because that's part of our eval, you know, down here in New Orleans, is how old were you during Katrina? What happened to you? What did you do? So that part was very thought out, and it's something that we discuss as a team, and trying to kind of pick topics that we want to focus on with Calm, so that we are addressing our community needs, especially the level of stigma that exists down here, not just about psychosis, but about mental health in general. And we ask our patients too, sort of what they think that we need to be doing. What could we be doing better? So.
A few more questions here left if we've still got time. People still here. I see still over 300, close to 400 participants remaining. So
I wish I could see everybody.
What a really sort of applicable, practical question is dealing with confidentiality when you do group outings like a boxing class. Do you inform the facility that the group is an FEB program, or how do you manage that?
No, so they knew that we were a program that you know, provided mental health services, and the owner knew that we were a psychosis provider, or provider for first episode psychosis, because quite frankly, it was really important to me that whoever we were partnering with, like, needed to do their own education and have knowledge about how to best support someone that comes in. And so those that wanted to participate knew that these were people, they know that the owner knows that they had experienced psychosis only, no diagnostic information or anything like that, or about meds. And we had a waiver that, you know, that the patients and the owner signed to, you know, keep things confidential. But it's complicated, and something that I have to speak with to, like, the legal team often, you know, about maintaining confidentiality. And even, you know, with the wellness coach piece, you know, he knows that they have a mental health, that they've had psychosis experience, but knows nothing about details about treatment. And they sign that they're okay with that. And it's optional, you know, everything's optional.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of people that don't want to do it. And and it doesn't have anything to do with psychosis per se, but, you know, a lot of people that opt out.
One of the participants asked a question in the middle of your presentation about wanting to know more about CALM, and then one of the later slides shared more information. But I'm seeing here a question I think that relates, because it sounds like CALM was kind of a referral arm for EPIC as a community education piece. Mm-hmm. And so did you see referrals increase with CALM? And for instance, if you have 15 referrals a month, how many are appropriate for services?
Interestingly, most of our referrals are appropriate for services. I mean, so we do, one of our team members does a lot of education with hospitals, with social workers, with other mental health clinics about what we do. So when we get a referral, initially when we started, it was kind of like, they weren't all necessarily appropriate referrals. Most of them now are. And so CALM has been a referral source for roughly like 10 patients. And I can't say specifically, I know that because we do this screening form and we ask these questions like, have you heard about CALM? Have you ever gone to the website? And where did you hear about us? So we can track how people found us. This last increase though in referrals, because we had 1 month that was, you know, like 23, and I don't necessarily attribute that to CALM necessarily, because we know that a certain number of them, well, like 66% of the self-referrals, and there were more self-referrals, came to us through CALM. But I also think though that with pandemic, there was sort of a shift in the need for mental health services as well that happened. Like it was kind of, June was kind of like the perfect storm, and a lot of other community agencies experienced an uptick in need that was likely influenced by COVID as well. And so I didn't, you know, my intention wasn't to make CALM all about getting more referrals. It was getting more referrals from self, because that to me is the ultimate goal, is that someone is self-reflecting and might see something and see some messaging and is like, maybe I should just call and ask a question. And that happens before they ever hit an ER, before they ever hit the hospital, before they ever even go to see another psychiatrist or anybody, you know, that they go to the right place, because that is, you know, one of the measures of DUP is start of psychosis until referral to a first episode service. So how do we get them to, what do we do with our messaging and with our programming that could influence someone to seek care themselves? That's kind of what we're always thinking about, which does capture some people that are probably in like a clinical high risk group. And we do take people that are clinical high risk technically.
I think that's it for our questions. We certainly did go over time, and I think we missed a few, but
It's not embarrassing. We have to like get up and like leave the auditorium. So,
everybody's trickling out. They already got their CEU.
yeah.
Thank you so much.